Hi, my name is Lisa Cortez, the director of Little Richard, I Am Everything, premiering in the U.S. documentary competition. Little Richard, we think we know who he is. Many of us remember his famous television appearances where he would tell people to shut up. And he kind of became, for those who didn't know his contributions to music, kind of one note as a joke. And so with this film, it was very important to kind of peel the onion, to look at this icon and his contributions, but to recognize that a very complex, brilliant man was an architect and an originator of a very important sound, and that's rock and roll. And to understand that as an architect and originator, that he was a Black queer man, that he had godmothers and godfathers like Escarita and Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who were also Black and queer. And so the origin story of rock and roll has been told through one lens. And it was really important to broaden the lens to bring in the contributions of people like Richard, Big Mama Thornton, etc. He is the king of rock and roll. What our film shows, though, is that Richard oftentimes had to proclaim that in what he felt was a void that didn't recognize his contributions. And what I love is that in the mid-1950s, he was saying he was a king. He was claiming a space for him that was denied for most Black people. It's a time of, Emmett Till's murder, and Little Richard shows up at the same time, declaring himself in a world that can be oftentimes dangerous for non-normative people. We love the Tutti Frutti origin story because Richard was sounding like everyone else when he started his career. But it's when he signs to Specialty Records and goes to New Orleans and records with Bumps Blackwell that he actually unleashes all the multiplicities of what it is to be Little Richard. And that's a world that's not afraid to talk about sex. And in the case of Tutti Frutti, good booty, if it don't fit, don't force it, you can grease it. You can imagine what he was actually talking about with that song. I was most interested in Richard's struggle between the sacred and the profane. He's a deeply religious person, and he never loses his faith, even when he's doing lots of drugs, having lots of sex, talking about it. But it was difficult for him to rectify his faith with being queer and not understanding that there was a space where he could do both. And so that pendulum that he goes back and forth, renouncing going to Bible school, going back into the business, starting to do gospel music, it really, accompanies a journey that is very complex, that is confusing at times, but it's ultimately beautifully human. Well, Little Richard planted many seeds. So there's the musical seeds that, we see with the Beatles, the Rolling Stones. Obviously, Mick Jagger talks really lovingly about it in the film, as does Tom Jones. And then if we fast forward to where we are now, you don't have a Harry Styles, you don't have a Lil Nas X, I believe. You don't have a Prince if you didn't have Little Richard. And but it's more than the music. You don't have a freedom of expression. Many people in the film talk about he gave others a freedom he couldn't give to himself. And so that's why he's a very transgressive figure, because he's challenging norms and he's opening up pathways that we are the beneficiaries of now. He was bold, he was beautiful, he was gender nonconforming. Now, if you were to go on TikTok or Instagram, you're going to see a lot of people who are doing those same things, but no one has ever done it with the heart and soul and spirit that Richard gave. Sundance has always been very welcoming to me with films as a producer. Many years ago, I brought The Woodsman here, followed by Precious. So as a director, to return with Little Richard, I Am Everything, 2 years, this is the first time the festival is live, and there's electricity here. There's such a just gathering of so many tribes that it's really a blessing. The other films that are in competition are remarkable. So for this film to be recognized, to have this platform to tell this story is really fantastic. It's the first film out of the festival, it's been announced today, that has a theatrical release. It's been acquired by Magnolia. And we'll also have a soundtrack. So we're going all the way with this film.